Hello people, it is I again, continuing our little theme here on the House of Lords reform that our good friend Tony Blair managed to push under the, well, not under the radar, over, through and beyond the radar, breaching the gates of the checks and balances that were set up to ensure that our parliamentary quasi-democratic system in place operates in a new, more party-focused way of less scrutiny from intellectuals and privileged persons. So we're going on. This is part 3, I believe. It looks like I'm going to have to go into a part 4 because there's just so much juicy goodness in this. I'm going to go over this. This part 3 is going to be more about the Lords reacting to Tony Blair's nonsense that is doing. It's really good. This video, A Lord's Tale, is all about the Lords, all these toffs, all these privileged people, loads of success, you would think, loads of education, loads of wealth, you would think. Not always the case, but at least you can see how they're kind of grumbling and griping and moaning and a bit deflated about what's going on, and yet it seems to be inevitable that it is going to go on. So it's a nice angle. You know, you'd never normally get to hang out with these guys, and particularly at the House of Lords, not as a riff-raff common bloke. So this is essentially that for Americans, just to reiterate, these are like the senators. Hereditary senators, yeah. So just because you're born, you're a senator, and then when you have kids, your hereditary line, your male son would inherit the right to sit in the Senate, regardless of political persuasion. So being a Democrat or a Republican, either way, doesn't matter. And it's quite good because sometimes people don't really go into the House of Lords traditionally. They'd be called a crossbencher. That is like no party affiliation. They're there to scrutinise the legislation in great detail. So let's go through some of the little clips I've got here. There's quite a few, but we'll go through them, and we'll start to reveal the kind of the pros and cons of the Lords, or the senators, if you like, in relation to someone like Tony Blair coming along, and or anyone. Imagine if someone, you know, someone even like Jeremy Corbyn, or you know, any elected member, you know, Barack Obama, even Donald J. Trump, you know, anyone who gets elected, the less checks and balances that there is on anyone, whoever it may be, then the more despotism or potential for despotism there is. Now, I'm not saying there is a despotism in England, but it's certainly eroding the powers of one of the checks and balances, you know, one of the chambers that is there to ensure that the main elected house is getting it right. Is not running on a runaway steam train to some sort of agenda, and that's essentially what's been eroded here by our good friend Tony Blair. This is 1334. So this is a plan to delay or derail. So these are the Lords now, not really conspiring, but at least discussing between themselves, because we're coming on the back from the previous video where you know, they're all a bit miffed about this, and they think there's going to be a fight. You know, they're not going to let it go down without a fight, and the House of Lords aren't going to leave without having some sort of opposition.
Okay. And this would wake them up, Lord Sheffield.
By exposing a technical irregularity in the bill, a group of backbenchers are hoping to invalidate it.
So this is a technicality in the bill. Okay, now often in law you sometimes hear the term loophole. You know? So if there's a word or a phrase or something that doesn't quite fit the situation, or the agenda, or the desired effect of a legislation, like a statute, for example. If there's something that doesn't quite fit, for example, you can't ride horses after 9 o'clock, and then someone arrests you for riding on a donkey after 9 o'clock, right? So you go into court and you say, hang on a minute, hang on, you said horses, yeah? Well, I wasn't on a horse, I was on a donkey. That's like an example of a loophole, or some sort of, you know, hang on, yeah, you're right, the legislation says horse and you're riding a donkey. They're two different things, you know. So therefore I'm not breaking any code, any law, you know, there's basically, it's a loophole, a technicality, some sort of very specific thing that can be called in to be like, oh, this is an error, we're an error, there's an error here, we can't go ahead with this, stop. This is the angle the Lords are doing, because they can do it, because they're absolutely, you know, they'll be law and legal geniuses and know all their Latin and stuff like that, so they're obviously in a good position to criticise any kind of Commons reform legislation that might be coming their way.
But to succeed, they need the support of popular and prominent House members. Earl Ferrers inherited his seat at 26 and has served on the Tory front bench as a minister.
Not to do with composition.
Lending...
I think that's that one. Let's go back in. And we're going on to the next stage, 1610.
It's over 200 candidates now, more like 250 candidates.
The House of Lords and the peerage is, whatever everybody says, part of our culture.
Okay, so he's just basically, this is a guy who does quite an eloquent defence of the Lords and what they're all about, and in fact he's now saying that, you know, the Lords and the nobility are essentially part of the culture ingrained since time immemorial, and certainly in legal memory.
Whether you like it or loathe it, and you know, the majority of people dislike it because they think it's unfair and inegalitarian, you know, which is fair enough. Because what people say, when you ask people, and all the polls, and the rare polls that are done about the House of Lords, they tend to be critical. They tend to think that peers are all aristocratic snobs who lord it over people. I mean, that's the phrase, to lord over somebody is pejorative. Drunk as a lord is pejorative. The impression people have is of you know, these men who get dressed up in funny old clothes, drink a little bit too much after lunch and have a nice snooze at the taxpayer's expense. They don't realise that some of them are like that, but the vast majority certainly aren't like that. I mean, there are loads of interesting people here who are not, who don't fit those caricatures. And that's why there's an interest, because there's a paradox in this whole place as well.
The paradox. So there's some traditional misconceptions as well as some. I don't know if I showed in the previous video, but there was a dentist who was particularly going over his own standing. You know, he was just a dentist. He had his father's father, whoever, just so happened to have a title. He didn't have any land. He didn't have any mansions, estates, or money. He's a self-made man. He's a dentist. Obviously done, you know, just like almost like a working, what is it called, a blue collar, white collar, maybe, worker. And he just happens to be a baron or a lord, and that's the title that his father's earned. And as a title, it's allowed to be passed down as property would be to your next of kin. Now, we're going on. We're moving on. We're moving 1933. Good year for some.
Welfare reform.
Oh, this is good. So this is about welfare reform. Okay, so bear in mind, this is a Labour government. Okay, what some people would root back to the Chartist movement. For any of you BCG members who want to know what's going on with the British Constitution Group being in their new grand juries that all failed, and now they've gone through the history books and found the Chartist movement, and they're going to reinvigorate that as a modern day movement, and then when that fails they'll probably just go back to voting for Labour. But anyway, so you've got a Labour government here, socialist, borderline Marxist government, for the people-ish, very much opposed to the conservative aristocracy way of running things without due care and attention for the common man. And what we've got here is the Common Man Party, the Labour Party, putting in a reform into Parliament, and obviously it has to go to this chamber, the Senate, the House of Lords. And they're basically trying to cut disability benefit or means test it so that it's more proportionate, which is fine. Now think about it. So that's a Labour People's Socialist government putting in a bill to limit or cap or review the money that disabled people are getting. And that bill is now in the toff, rich, posh, noble, lordy, well-off, well-to-do House chamber now. And this has come into the House of Lords. And we're just going to listen to see how these carefree, well-endowed, well-off, rich, toffee people are going to react to this reform of disability benefit.
The disabled, my lords, did not choose to be disabled. They unfortunately are disabled. I really do feel...
Some of the lords are very...
So there we are. So he's you know, he knows he's got every privilege in the world, and he's just raising it as a point. Is, hang on, we're getting a bill from the Labour government who's trying to reform this system of benefit to the poorest and most needy in society, the principal people the government should be taking care of. And now we're discussing about curtailing, capping, reviewing, reducing their benefit.
Ask the Commons to think again before it
And this is another chap's made a very good comment on
becomes
this.
law.
So the people concerned are being doubly punished by this clause. Its philosophy is, to him that hath shall be given, and from him that hath not shall be taken away even that he hath.
That's a beautiful thing to say, isn't it? Because you think about nowadays, since the financial collapse, was it 2008, 2007, whatever it was, people are complaining about how through this massive quantitative easing program, how the rich have got the rich, like the 1%, the people you'll never meet or you'll never know, unless you're one of them. But there's not many of them. But the fact is that a lot of the wealth has been going into the rich 1 or 2%. And here we are back in 2000. Well, I don't know whenever this was, 2000, early 2000s, and he's talking about, hey, what is this? What's going on? Why are we taking from those that have nothing and giving to those that have it all already? And this is a House of Lords standing up, with all his privilege. This lovely Lord Russell, who we're going to focus in on a lot more, is pointing this out. Where is the moral justification for this? Are we seriously, as honourable people, going to take money from the poor so that the rich or the well-off can have more and the poor can have less?
It's not the policy of this party. I didn't think it was the policy of the Labour Party either.
Yeah, that's a brilliant thing to say. How is this? What the point I was just making earlier on? How is the Labour Party in the business of taking money off the poor when they are the Labour Party, who was formed from disgruntled coal workers and other labourers, factory workers, who are all getting shat on in terms of wages and health and safety? And they form a party that has become the Labour Party, and yet this same party is now trying to eat its own, basically turn on its own people. But anyway, point well made. 2207.
Don't get elected.
Let's just go back.
What will you do if you don't get elected? How will that affect things?
I haven't really thought about that. Obviously I'll be at home in Argyle, wearing my overalls, selling petrol from my petrol pumps.
Is that what you do?
Yes, when I'm not here.
Can you explain that to me?
Sorry?
If you would you explain that to me?
I have a small filling station in Argyle, and I work there myself, hands-on, when I'm not here.
So it's just explaining. Yeah, he might be well off and well-to-do. He might have connections to the petroleum industry, fine. But what does he do when he's in Argyle, which is in the middle of nowhere in Scotland, by the way? It's not like a massive town. It's like a countryside. So in the middle of, presumably, I'm presuming here, but let's just, it's not exactly a massive built-up area, Argyle. So he's got a small petrol pump station. He puts his overalls on and he's out serving petrol to the people who need petrol. Obviously, he's making money out of it, but, hey, he's providing a service. At the end of the day, he's producing a product. Right, anyway, let's crack on to the next one. 2429. This is Russell doing a very good taboo here about what the Lords should do. They should basically, let this nonsense go by, and then once it's gone by, they can basically move on, because it won't be reformed again anytime soon.
All the rest of us have to.
Try their luck out.
Open competition and see where they stand in it.
So it's talking about the election. Basically, all these lords now, so there was like 700 of them, and now they're going to have an election to see which 90-something or 94 stay. And he's basically saying, look, it sounds like a plan. Put your name forward, get voted for. If you stay, you stay. If you don't, you don't.
I think that's what they're so frightened of.
Well, of course. But once we accept that open competition, that, I think, does defuse the anger against us. And if there's a fight between two wolves, and it's apparent one of them wins, the defeated wolf bends down and exposes the back of its neck to the winner, who snarls and snaps and rages, but can't bite. I think it's the right way to do it.
Can't bite?
It's taboo. And the defeated wolf holding its neck down like that is defenseless. It puts a taboo on biting him.
Yeah. So let's take the beatings, admit defeat, but at least then we'll be able to move on and survive, and it should blow this out of the water for the next, well, not very long it seems, because there's still nonsense going around the House of Lords, which we'll come to very soon. I've got a lovely little bit of I wouldn't say research, but insight maybe into what's going on with these out with the olds and in with the news.
I never wish to see.
Oh, and it's right here. Oh, would you know it?
Something happening in there
Okay, let me just put some context in
that
this.
I never wish to see.
Okay, so this is the man outside one of the House of Lords buildings. Okay, it's just a security guard, and someone's come up to him. And the guy who's come up to him is our good friend, Lord Ahmed. Now, he's the Northern Labour chairman of I think it's South Yorkshire, so he's a northern part of England. And he's a Labour chairperson for that area. Now, he was on the back of winning the election. It seems that Tony Blair had made him a lord, like a lifetime peer. So for your services to the Labour Party, I'm really impressed with you. I'm going to make you a lord to that house, not because of any birthright, not because of any hereditary kind of deeds or anything like that. Just because Tony Blair's said, "Yep, you're one of my gang. I'm going to reward you with a title. Your title's going to be a life peer in this House of Lords." So with all the hereditaries being under pressure to be kicked out, here you have the new ilk, the new class, the class of 1998 or whatever it is, coming in to have a look. Oh, I'm going to be sitting in this house pretty soon. Let's have a look. So here he is, Lord Ahmed, coming in to gloat. I think maybe might be a good way of putting it.
Is there something happening in there?
So is there something happening in there, like he doesn't know what's going on now that the Labour Party's just won the election and they want to kick out all the hereditary peers, and it's in the manifesto, which I've explained for anyway. So he's being a wise guy here.
Yes, the Conservative peers have an amazing time.
Oh, yes, they must be deciding when they're going out to this place. That's tomorrow.
Is it, sir?
Yes, I think so, but I wouldn't get you involved in politics.
No, sir. Culture. Thank you, sir.
So I hope you pick up what you want from that. But I was like, who is this guy? Let's have a little look at Nazir Ahmed, Baron Ahmed, Lord Ahmed. Blah, 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 blah. He was appointed on the recommendation of Prime Minister Tony Blair in 1998. Many of his political activities relate to the Muslim community both in the UK and Pakistan. Ahmed was a member of the Labour Party for the first of his career. He was suspended from the Labour Party following allegations of anti-Semitism, anti-Jewish kind of rhetoric. He is reported to be blamed that he blamed a Jewish conspiracy for his prison sentence. Well, it is a judiciary. I mean, you're probably right in that respect. Judiciary, Judeo-Christian culture. Following a fatal crash on the motorway. So he had a crash on a motorway and someone died, and he got put in prison for that. And he's blaming that on a Jewish conspiracy. Interesting. Resulting in immediate suspension from the Labour Party, from which he resigned later in the year. That was in 2013. Okay, right. There we are. I think there's something else here. So this is where you see about, well, I mean, you can read it. Look, freeze the screen. I'm not going to go over this. It's got some controversies here about his views on and what he said about the Jewish community, shall we say, which is, whatever. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. This is about his fatal car crash that he had. That meant someone died and he went to prison. Martin Gombar, 28. He killed a 28-year-old in a motor vehicle accident. Well, anyway, that is what it is. So here he is, outside, gloating, probably euphoric on the back of Tony Blair's victory, and now he's a House of Lords member, awarded by Tony Blair. And was it 14 years later he's had an accident and killed a man in a car crash, which I thought was quite interesting. And that was him in the early days of his political career. Now let's crack on. Next section, 27. Well, I just had an interesting feeling about that guy. There's an interesting guy coming to the door of the people who are going to be kicked out of their own house to gloat and to act like he doesn't know what's going on in there, and then lo and behold, 14 years later, he's in a motor vehicle accident and someone dies in that. So let's go to the next bit. Where are we up to? 27. So we're going to 2838. 2838.
Reform.
Oh, this is interesting. So this is like, I was always of the opinion, why aren't the Lords really getting pissed off about this? When King John back in Magna Carta days was taking a piss out of the Lords and taking all their stuff and, essentially divine right of kinging them. And they all had uprising, and they took the city of London, and they invited a French king to rule over the country because they all really hated John. But when Tony Blair comes along and does like a diplomatic, legislative change to their House of Lords, all of these lords do jack poop nothing about it. They all sit down and take it like good little boys. And that's what I don't understand. Surely, and from the rhetoric of that, what was that lord in the previous video? Was it Lord Dreadnought? You remember the guy who was talking about the fear god Dreadnought? Well, and he was talking about shark-infested sea out there, and then lo and behold, nothing actually came of any of their threats. and alas, they've all lost their position in their own house. You think if someone's going to kick you out of your own house, you would do more than bend over and take it. And this is an interesting example of one person standing up who is part of their society in here, loosely related. Obviously, they all judge each other's peerage and how it came to be. As there's a hierarchy, if you like, there's a pecking order of privilege. And this guy actually stands up and disrupts the proceedings. I haven't done much research into him, but I might do it in a future case, just for my own gratification. But let's have a look at what actually happened. So this is the third reading of the bill in the Lords. Everything seems to be going as planned, but alas, something happens.
Takes his seat.
Third reading of the House of Lords Bill, the Baroness J. of Paddington.
See, the first thing he says, this bill drafted in Brussels. It's interesting he should say that. I've not heard anyone come across that before, but who knows? He's putting his foot down and he's being most disorderly, most unlordly, more like a commoner riffraff, and everyone's groaning. But who's groaning? Are they the peers that have been put there by Tony Blair groaning, and maybe the hereditaries are not groaning? It's an interesting one. Let's just go back a bit because it happens quick.
This bill drafted in Brussels is
How dare he mention Queen and Country? Get this man out.
I think he's the son of a peer, and he jumped onto the woolsack and started raving, and he's been dragged out of the chamber.
This is really the great thing, isn't it, about the hereditary peerage? You never know what's going to happen next.
Well, that was exciting, Michael. Well, I've discovered.
He's the youngest son of the eldest son of the Duke of St Albans, who got his title because Nell Gwyn was complaining that her newborn baby hadn't got enough money. And the king went round to see her, and he said, "I'll throw the baby out the window," to which she said, "Throw down the Duke of St Albans," and that's what that is.
Why did he jump on the woolsack? Why did he do that?
Because he's dotty. And he's been writing his all letters saying we're throwing away heritage and all the rest of it.
Has he been removed?
He has been removed.
How very boring, so there's no point in going in.
We missed it.
You made me miss it.
So there we go, it's all done and dusted. So that's them reacting to their own ilk, jumping on the woolsack. Like a good jumping on the woolsack. What's this, 32:48 now? Let's move on. Trying to save you some time, but this is quite juicy, a lot of these segments. Oh, it's Baroness Miller, right? She's so nice. You can see she's quite tearful in her eyes, and she does give quite a good account of what's going on. And she's actually got more balls than a lot of the men, in my opinion, in what she's saying here. But obviously, she's just doing what she can within the confines of what she can do. Let's have a little look to her though. But this is quite an emotional baroness, obviously a lady's perspective of what's going on.
The grief, really. I mean, I really did feel grief.
You do? Why do you feel it's so strong?
I tell you why I do. If they decided to reform the House of Lords, which is fine, I still say it's the finest revising chamber in the world, but if they felt that the hereditary peers, the time has come and they want to revise it, reform it, do whatever they will, then do it for all of us. How some can just be chucked out and others, I mean, at the end of the day, why am I in the Lords, Molly? I ask myself, I'm there because a Prime Minister sent me. It's modern day patronage. And when you saw the glee of all those noble lords on the other side, that finally they'd somehow got rid of the hereditary peers, and they're so thrilled, but have they ever stopped to think, why are they there? Tony Blair sent a whole reef of them in lately. What, will we be better at scrutinising legislation because it's modern day patronage?
They would argue because you personally owned it, not your father. Simple as that.
Maybe they would argue that, but I would say that I would rather have patronage of several hundred years ago, when the noble lords who have served this country well can look at it dispassionately, and they do not owe their position here to this Prime Minister or the one before.
Very good point there. Is being assigned a lifetime peer, a lifetime seat on the Senate, whichever way you want to look at it, being imagine like Donald J. Trump or Tony Blair, for example, the Prime Minister, President, whatever. He's assigning his yes men to this House to ensure that legislation gets through, essentially, because he has little or no control over some of these hereditaries who can, be fuddy-duddy, whatever. They can just delay, procrastinate, review, critique quite correctly some of the legislation. Right, now these hereditary peers gain their titles quite often from the Queen or King themselves from eons gone by. So is that any different from a Prime Minister like Tony Blair, for example, making someone like Lord Ahmed? How is Tony Blair granting Lord Ahmed position in the House of Lords any different from the Queen granting, Duke Ahmed, Baron Ahmed, whoever, his title from all those years ago? It's the same thing. It's just one is established and historic and hereditary, and one is today fashionable and in vogue. Surely it's more risky to give today's political popularism more of the hearsay in the what do they call it, the checking chamber, like the chamber that looks at what's actually going on from a status quo point of view, rather than just filling it full of yes men who say, "Yep, Tony says so. Let's make it through. Let's pass it through." It's almost like it might as well not be there. It's either there as it is, or it's not there at all. Why have a checking chamber? That's essentially what's going on here. When you boil it all down to the bare bones, it's about having legislation passing smoothly and quickly through a checking chamber, a second chamber in name only, not in actual practice. So let's go to 3619. And that's she put it very well there, Baroness Miller. Well done. 3619.
Can you leave the paper with me? Thank you.
Listen here.
We can't let them go, really. Just keep them in.
When a bill or anything is...
Oh yeah, this one. This is a layman's interpretation. So this is like a me or you who would happen to work in the House of Lords. This guy gives his a layman's interpretation of what he sees the laws doing. This is from someone who actually works in the building.
We can't let them go, really. Just keep them in.
When a bill or anything is produced and laid on the table and then it's sent down here, all these people that they call old fuddy-duddies outside, this lot here, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. They break each amendment, each item down and debate it, and then they put it back together again like a full jigsaw, and then they send it back down to the other house. A lot of them know what they're talking about. If the public outside knew what this house actually does for them, maybe they'd find a different opinion.
Well put. So we had the Baroness Miller's point of view about the gaining titles. Is it any different from a Prime Minister or a President from a monarch? If you get your title, it allows you to sit in that house. Who cares? It's the same thing, essentially. And then this guy, the layman, is just saying, look, these guys actually know what they're talking about. If you kick out the people who are like, they've got a bit of history, a bit of culture, a bit of expectation to be well informed, as opposed to being almost like a worship of Trump. Imagine like a bunch of Trump worshippers flooding a chamber. Would you expect them to know every intricacies of law and grammar and forming your words, spelling, punctuation, and grammar, all that stuff? I mean, I wouldn't be able to do it. Not based on my English skills, which you're probably all aware of. Right, we'll go here. 36, 38, 38. Boom. Right. Let's play it until 38, 38.
I bet you'll have some models.
I think this is another Lord's opinion on this. Now they're being asked to vote for their own buddies. So there's like 600 of them, and now they have to vote for 94 places, of which something like 41 are available for picking.
Bet you will. Lord Bathurst.
Lord Bathurst. On what basis did you vote?
I voted for who I thought would be the best people to do the job, which is really difficult because some of them you like, some people you like very much clearly aren't going to do it. So what we're being asked to do is stab our friends in the back, which is pretty distasteful, really.
Which is is interesting. So he's saying that what we're being asked to do is to stab our friends in the back. So you've gone all through this palaver of trying to defend the House of Lords hereditary peers in the House of Lords, House of Peers, whichever way you want to do it. So you've been put under pressure. You're defending yourself tooth and nail, and once you've given in, you're then more than happy to bend over and have someone bite. As the other guy was saying, it's a taboo to bite the wolf in the back of the neck. But in a way, you're being asked to bite the wolf. The wolf is biting you in the back of the neck because they're asking you now, as a final act, is to stab all your friends in the back, all your fellow peers, and to vote which ones you want to keep and which ones you don't want to keep. So yeah, interesting. It's obviously making them all feel sick in their stomachs. They know it's wrong inherently. It's probably what their ancestors are screaming through the ages, saying, "Bunch of bloody you-know-whats."
There is something a bit sick about making people vote for themselves, their own pack.
It's fantastically sick, and to have a 42, the sort of pathetic pretense that this is democracy when you've got 240 people voting for 116 candidates for 42 places. I mean, give me a break.
There we are. He knows the score, but what are you doing about it? Bending over and going with it. 41-57.
But that's the change.
So these guys are having a chat about, this is a bit what we picked on in the previous video, about the lobby fodder. Do you remember that Lord saying lobby fodder? He's always done what the party wished him to do in the Lords to get something through or to block it. So these two people in a private, well, I wouldn't say private conversation because it's being recorded, but in their conversation here, they're having a little chat about
the job. I've got actually something to do.
But that's the change. The change is that the part-time peer has gone.
Yes. You put your own interests, which is in my case farming, or somebody else being a dentist or being whatever, before the party, don't you? Right. And that is bad. That's a sin against the Holy Ghost. You've got to worship the party regardless.
Think about that. Worship the party. Worship like the movement, the Tony Blair, the Donald Trumps, the Barack Obamas, whoever it may be. You're kind of worshipping the party rather than doing your job in that respect.
They want the votes. Yeah. They don't want people who will not turn up, like you and I didn't turn up, because we had other things to do.
You see, it's a vital point who is going to follow us. I think it's the one thing that the public really do support us. They don't support the hereditary peerage. Don't let's bluff it ourselves to that for a minute. I'm not sure I support myself anyhow, but they do support the idea that they should know, we should know, who is going to take our place.
What are you coming to...
Yeah. Okay, 4306, it's literally there.
Nowadays, politics is a career. These people start aged, these sort of political advisors start at the age of about sort of 12, having come out of Red Brick University, go into central office or Millbank, immediately get given a sort of seat, end up in Parliament, and then they either make it or they don't. And then in their 40s or 50s they decide they need a career move. So they retire from politics and go into the city, hopefully having done quite well in politics, so they can land a decent job. Actually, it's the wrong way around. It means that you get people in politics for the wrong reasons. They're in politics for their own career reasons rather than for the benefit of the people they're meant to serve. It's a different game. Yeah. I mean, the trouble is that our system in Britain is designed for amateurs. The House of Commons was designed, and the House of Lords was designed for people who had their own income. And
see, just one pause there. Crucial. The political system, or the system of public service in this country, was designed for people who were already well-made or self-made men or women. Yeah, they always had wealth. Going into politics or going into public service was just a way of paying the nation back, making a better society, because they had all their money. Like these lords, I don't know if they get paid nowadays. I mean, really, they shouldn't get paid. I mean, they can get paid, compensated for their time if they wish. But essentially, the political game was a service game, and the idea of getting paid like vast sums of money wasn't really what anyone would have gone into politics for. And I'm of the view of that. If you go into public service life, or you want to be a local representative, it shouldn't be a cash cow that you can just sit on and vote for your party as and when they need it, and then maybe you might make a difference, maybe you're not, but at all times you're getting paid a lovely salary and a beautiful pension and a second house and a duck pond and whatever else it is. It's all this stuff that is deflated from it. If you took the money out of politics, all the greedy buggers would be out of it. Or another argument you could say is that it might it might mean that more people will be inclined to seek special interest groups in order to beef up their money. But it's a very interesting thing where he's saying it's like in the olden days it used to be this, and now it's like you go to school, you come out of a red brick university at age 12, which is taking a piss, it's like 21 or 18, 21, whatever, and you get given a, you get processed through, you get a seat, you stand for election, you might get it because it's a safe Democratic, Republican, Conservative, Labour seat, it's always going to go in a certain way. And then after that, you might get put into another bit of the thing. So it's kind of like a factory, if you like. And eventually, you do the bidding of your superiors, and you retire out of politics. And let's think Obama. Let's think of David Cameron, Tony Blairs, and the killings of Tony Blair that George Galloway's tried to allude to. All these politics get out of politics, and they start seeking. Oh, Hillary Clinton. What's the Clinton Trust? God, there's all kinds of stuff that's going on the outside that people use their position or connections in order to make big bucks on the outside of the public service. That is a crucial wrong or concern for the modern day public service life. One last thing is 4427. Well, we'll finish off this guy's speech.
Therefore, that side of it wasn't thought about, and we've now reached a watershed.
And he's saying this is now a watershed moment, yeah? Like a watershed. What's that thing? Nixon, Watergate, watershed. All these things. It's like we're breaking point now. Something's got to be done.
And we're either going to have professional politicians, or we have to go back to the way it was before. We can't go back. So I guess we'll end up with professional politicians.
Which gallery is his lordship's guest in? South East. It's got some.
The trouble is how do you reform the House? And this is the real difficulty, because if you elect it, you've got to give it more power. Because if you don't give it more power, nobody in their senses would stand for election. I mean, why should they go to the bother of being elected if they haven't got any power? On the other hand, if it has more power, that means the House of Commons has less power, and the House of Commons will never agree to that. On the other hand, if you don't elect it and you have a nominated House, then they're just placemen of one form or another, and they're really no better than people like me. In fact, I'm hereditary, and therefore I'm beyond the pale. But in point of fact, a nominated House has just the same problems as a hereditary House.
And we'll leave it there. So that's part 3. I thought that was a very nice speech, a little chat about what the problems are. I mean, having life peers appointed or having hereditary peers, all you're doing is moving. It's the same problem. You're just moving it around. And we found, even in recent years, in England, that the House of Lords is like, hang on a minute, we're trying to amend, review whatever legislation that's coming through, and House of Commons like, hang on a minute, you're not there to do that, but hang on, we're the amending House. So it's kind of like, oh, we thought we got rid of all you people. No, we're still here, but in a different form. So it's kind of like backfired in a way, the current state of affairs. So like the reforms to the Senate for our American peoples, the Congress, the Commons, the Congress is supposed to be the law proposing element of the government. The Senate or the House of Lords would be the reviewing it to see if it kind of makes sense. And, this is all done in the name of the executive, which would be the Prime Minister, the President, or the Queen, via the Prime Minister being the proxy. And that's essentially how it works. So, I don't know what the Senate does in America. Maybe Americans can think about that in more detail. I've heard Trey Gowdy saying about Congress is the law-making part of the branch of the government, and he's fed up of all these other, I don't know if it's whether it be the executive making laws, what they called executive orders, or the Senate, or whatever. But he says, no, the lawmaking is in the Congress, is in the Commons. These are the elected representatives to the government. Yeah. Anyway, let's leave it there. I'm going to have to go into part 4. I've still got a hell of a lot of time left to go on this video, but we'll do our best. Another 40 minutes. I'll try and condense it down. That'll be a 4-part series all done and dusted. Tatty bye.